Hi everyone, welcome back to the Driving Talk podcast with your host Robert Lewis. This is one of our Silverlake Sit-downs where I have some very special guests on. Normally the case would be that I would be sitting with them in front of a camera, but you guys are a long way up north, and I'm talking of course to Eliza Clapham and Nick and Katie, also known affectionately as Nick Gough and Katie Ramsay. And you are of the organisation Driven Minds, and today is going to be a podcast for our listeners and viewers, obviously, for everyone that's watching the vodcast. We're going to learn a lot about Driven Minds, how it came about, the reasons for it, the good that can be done through Driven Minds, and future plans for it. But to start off, as with anything, you're going to have to introduce yourself, guys. So introduce yourselves. Welcome to the Driving Talk podcast, powered by Icon. Away you go. Just take it from there.
Who wants to go first?
You can go.
I see. The first one, I thought to myself, I'll put them on the spot. No, I can't be that harsh. So we'll start off Nick Gough and Katie Ramsay. So we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll go first. So a bit about myself, how I got into motorsport, what I do, that sort of thing. Probably kick off with that. Yeah, I'm Katie. I have Katie and Nick. Worked in motorsport on off since 2019. My day job is head of people, so HR, which is a nice, big, serious top job. So it keeps me busy, and I think it's definitely helped with sort of the setup of Driven Minds and how we can operate as well. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, I'm trapped in a nutshell. So I'm Nick. I've been club racing for 6 years now. And yeah, I'm part of one of the three of us of Driven Minds. Yeah, looking to push on. Eliza.
Hi, I'm Eliza. I've worked in racing since I was 17, so that would have been back in 2018. I started off quite fresh into the game, no family in racing. I've worked with Janettas mostly. I've travelled around with the British Touring Car paddock and the British GT paddock. I'm now starting a new venture, but I don't want to talk too much about it just yet because I don't want to jinx it. But it's going into a completely new industry. But I started Driven Minds back in 2021, and now I have my two lovely co-directors with me, which are Katie and Nick.
Which one's which?
I think Katie's Nick and Nick's Katie.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Then you might get confused over who's who. But
yeah, absolutely. So Katie, for those that are watching the vodcast, Katie is the one with the beard, and obviously Nick's got the nicer, longer hair. Just to make it a bit lighter. A bit lighter. We do like a bit of light humour here, but so Driven Minds as a concept itself. I'm going to put this sort of. It's going to sound like a bit of a blunt question, but how much is it needed? How much is an organisation like Driven Minds needed in motorsport?
I would say an incredible amount. I think it's, if you think about the basis of what motorsport is, and as much as I'm myself and Eliza being women in motorsport, it is still very heavily male dominated. You're in a sector full of people who are fighting for sponsorship, self-employed. At the end of the day, it's a sport which, is losing a lot of people's sort of disposable income in that respect, in particular club racing perspective. And at this point, with the cost of living crisis and things going up and being more expensive, people use motorsport as an outlet for stress and to enjoy themselves on a weekend. And that's kind of becoming a bit more of a struggle. You add all those things together on top of, men typically are known for not talking about their own mental health. It seems still a bit of a stigma. So you put all these bits into a mixing bowl, and it almost feels like a ticking time bomb, and we've all heard stories of people having struggles with their mental health in the motorsport community, people making very kind of difficult decisions for themselves and their own lives. And I think that's just the nature of what we're in. But it's, as much as motorsport can be amazing for people, it can also kind of, get people into quite a downward spiral. So it's definitely something that we sort of notice is a gap in the sport, and it's how do we raise awareness of that, and how do we tackle that, and how do we create a supportive community for every one of us to be able to do what we do best, which is enjoying racing. If it's driving the cars, setting the cars up, running them, watching them, all that kind of those kind of roles really. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
what was the key that sparked this all off? What kind of gave you guys? Was there any particular event or something that happened that inspired you to make a change and create this?
So it was obviously was kind of birthed from my idea back in 2020, 2021. I was struggling with my own mental health. I've worked, like I said, in racing from a very young age. I've always struggled with my mental health throughout being a teenager. And it was just like this kind of, I guess, a moment where, we're not racing, or if we are, it's very reduced numbers and things like that. And it was kind of like that kind of spark in my mind of why aren't we talking about our health issues or mental health issues? Because I've tried to talk about them quite openly for years. And it was kind of a moment where I was talking to my partner at the time about how difficult it was and stuff. And he was like, yeah, but no one in racing really wants to talk about it. And then I kind of put a social media post up and was like, would anyone like to actually talk about it? And then that's kind of when the likes of Katie came on board, and there was Richard Morris Racing, he came in, there was lots of different people. Even Motorsport UK at the beginning were very keen about what we were doing. It's just due to the way it was working, it wasn't going to work for them at the time. And it was just so interesting. It literally started off as me just saying, does anyone want to talk? And then it kind of turned into this amazing community of people, and now basically a brand, really. So
I feel like it needed someone to sort of, like you say, Eliza, to have that first question about it, or someone to say, oh, how about this? And then you started to see loads of people and going, oh, okay, yeah, that would be really useful, or yeah, that would be good to have, and I've experienced this. And I feel like people kind of wait for someone to start that trend first and then start that kind of thread of conversation. And I think back in 2021, we were unlocking slightly in terms of motorsport, but still lots of restrictions. People, went from a full season of work and it was sort of really kind of cut and taken away from them. And the financial pressures of that, and losing sponsorship and losing drives, and you had this plan and you set yourself out your career, what you want to do, and something that gets taken away from you, you very easily fall into the pit of, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to turn to. And I think particularly 2 years ago, if you were in that kind of downward spiral, I think from a motorsport perspective, I wouldn't even know where you could go to get that support or speak to somebody, because it's not well advertised, it's not known, it's not really, there's no real kind of clear path, I think.
Yeah, and I think definitely from my perspective, as a man in racing as well, I think we aren't the most proactive probably initially, and I think it's something from my side where with Driven Minds, you're sort of starting that conversation, and the more we're out there, the more people come to us and say, I'm struggling with such and such, I'm struggling with this. And it is starting that conversation already, where, you'll know yourself, Rob, as a racer, stress isn't just on a race weekend. It's the build up to a race weekend. It's the build up to a season. And I'm sure you won't mind me saying, obviously, me and you are very amateur club racers, but it goes right through to touring and beyond, where, okay, maybe that's their day job as well, but they've still got the same stresses, if not more, stresses to secure sponsors, to perform their absolute best. They're going to have to think about how they eat, how they exercise between race weekends. It's a high pressure environment, and then to bring that back to club races, it's a high pressure environment that we do it for fun. So if you're at a point where you're getting stressed out over a hobby that you're supposed to do for fun to stop you from getting stressed out, that's when you need to sort of have a think and have a reset and figure out, actually, hold on, how do I start enjoying this again? Or who do I need to speak to cope with this so that I can enjoy it?
And I think, I know we talk a lot around, mental health and, kind of it's anxiety or depression, but sometimes it just can come down to the resilience part of us. You know, you have a bad weekend or a bad result, or someone punts you off the circuit and you just think in your head, you know, pounds and pence, how much that cost me, and how can I repair this? How can I get myself back up again? And sometimes it can be as simple as just, you know, being able to signpost people or talk through with somebody how you get over that. And like you say, it's a hobby. You want to enjoy it. You want to love it. So trying to being able to sort of help people get out of that negative side and get themselves back on track and get them back, literally back on track, back on the circuit. And get through the bad stuff, because then you get the good stuff after. You know, bad race weekend isn't a bad season. You know, it's sometimes you just got to dust yourself off and don't know, how do I get myself sort of back in the driving seat and get going again and find the love again. You know, and
if you can adapt that mindset for what may have been a bad race weekend before, and actually think, it was a good race weekend. I hung out with mates. I got top 10 finishes. I wanted podiums, but I got top 10 finishes and hang out with mates and had a great time. The car's in one piece. Maybe that's redefining what's a good or a bad race weekend as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's kind of the thing. I mean, as you said, Nick, we're essentially, when we do it, we're amateurs. So if we crunch the car, if we haven't got enough money to go racing, we simply don't go racing. We've got day jobs. That's how we deal with it. And obviously, one of my co-hosts on this show, Max, he is a professional racing driver. He lives and breathes it. He has to. It's his day job. So he knows full well that if he goes out and has a couple of bad results and has a bit of a run of pretty bad results, that's most of the time not his own doing. He's doing everything he can and driving the wheels off it. But he's also have that pressure in the back of his mind of, this is going to affect sponsors, this could affect potential work. There's almost a bit of a snowball effect with this kind of thing. And that's in the professional era. We haven't even touched on yet, obviously, the guys that are running businesses out of Club Motorsport, the guys that are up-and-coming drivers that are being pushed, you know, even young kids I've seen in the paddock, obviously, when you talk to these people, and it's quite clear that they've got a lot of pressure on their shoulders, perhaps from home, because mum and dad have given them a lot of backing and spent a lot of money, and there's all that pressure to perform. And I'm not even going to get it. I mean, you touched perfectly there. COVID did a lot of things in this world. And I think touched on it absolutely perfect there. It very much paused everyone's route to earn money there and then, because from what I can remember, there wasn't a lot of support for self-employed people, were there? If you were freelance or self-employed, you were on your own. So there was a lot of anguish, especially during COVID, and I guess, Eliza, that's what added fuel to the fire to give you guys the impetus to go, right, we need to do something here and give these guys some support.
Yeah, I mean, my day job and my career is human resources. At the time, I was working in property and construction, and that sector completely fell apart, and that was horrid to kind of go through. And then I had this stack of race weekends. I was across 3 different paddocks, had my calendar set out, all these race weekends in 2020, and it just got completely annihilated. And you know, back then it was a lot of like kind of promo work, hospitality, and even when it came down to essential workers, and much as I love my job in motorsport at the time, I'm not essential. So, you know, I would argue that I was, but obviously, you know, from a COVID lockdown perspective. But, you know, I felt it myself. I had my day job to fall back on. Yes, it was particularly difficult, but I had a regular income still. And I really felt for the people who, you know, were a lot of, you know, ad hoc or maybe not kind of strict contracts in place, a service agreement. So you're all self-employed, all that work disappears, and then you're left. And then the government support was minimal, I would say, to put it politely. You know, and that's just on the financial side of it, let alone anything else. And then you then have things on lock, and then the fierce competition to be able to get that work back again, as well as people who are new into the industry wanting to get started, who could maybe, you know, offer work experience, cheaper day rates, and there's people who are experienced trying to recover what they lost. It's like you say, it's an absolute minefield. And I don't think it was really estimated from a motorsport perspective, the kind of impact, not just on drivers, but circuit staff, marshals, team bosses, people in club racing who were just trying to kind of get back to kind of normality again. And that's it's mentally exhausting. You know, I think we're all kind of still feeling it a little bit now. You know, it's definitely a tough one.
I was going to say, I mean, that year was the year that absolutely turned my career on its head, let's face it. I mean, I was ready to quit my part-time job working, selling shoes. And I had a whole 3 calendar year set up like Katie did. I was ready. I had teams begging me to come work for them. Minute that COVID hit, in fact, I was at the circuit the day that the lockdown got announced to be the next day. And we were all just joking, going, "Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be 2 weeks and we'll all be back and it'll be all great." And I lost all my work. I lost all my connections. I didn't have anything. And then obviously later in that year, people that do follow me and know me, I ended up injuring myself anyway. So, you know, I lost that kind of career. But the thing is, I often think maybe if COVID didn't happen and I stayed in the racing paddock, that injury wouldn't have happened and I'd be in so much a different place. And I think that's kind of also why Driven Minds is so important, because it's, you know, that kind of sense of negative spiraling where you think, oh, maybe if that didn't happen, this could have happened better. You know, it's kind of there to help people that might have had a similar situation, lost whatever due to COVID, lost whatever due to an injury, a health issue, money issues, anything like that. It's, you know, we are a community of people that are diehard for what we love. Let's face it. We'll go to the ends of the earth for racing. So it's kind of...
That's it. I think motorsport as a community is very tight. You know, you hear a lot of the phrase and terminology of family as a motorsport community. And I think sometimes that can get lost, whether it's just you're maybe not as exposed to it, you're not at every round of a season, you're not maybe as extrovert where you can go and speak to people, but Driven Minds can create that community for you. And you know, if you go to Driven Minds, that you can immediately access people who have the same interests or same pressures, same, you know, love for for motorsport and race cars and all that kind of good stuff, that you're not going to get turned away. And it provides that access, as well as the sort of mental health signposting and support, but just someone you can have a chat to, you know, and as someone who can vibe off.
Yeah, I think it's also, like I say, we've got people from different backgrounds within motorsport who, like we've sort of mentioned, we've all got our own experiences. I wouldn't go as far as to say expertise, but you can lean on our experiences. You know, myself, there's two incidents on track to me that have sort of really want me to push forward and do as much with Driven Minds as we can, where I wouldn't say it's necessarily failures in motorsport, but I feel like things could have been handled differently or better post-event. And that just highlights, I suppose, a gap, which is where we're trying to fill. You know, I've had my own personal experience of an awful incident a few years ago at Snetterton where we lost a racer, which, you know, took me 8 or 9 months to probably come to terms with the fact that I perhaps had an issue from that, and needed to speak to someone. And then a very good friend of mine had just a nasty accident. He's absolutely fine physically, but it's taken a lot of months for him to really speak about how much it's affected him. And without going into too much detail, you need someone there to speak to who perhaps sometimes is impartial. Perhaps you don't know them. They aren't a club official. They aren't a team member, because sometimes, you know, sometimes the hardest people to open up to are your loved ones and your family and your friends. And so if we can be there for literally anyone, whether it's racers, marshals, mechanics, scrutineers, club officials, it doesn't matter who. If it's someone that they just want to have a chat and let off some steam about an incident that they'd seen, been involved with, or just has been on their mind, that's kind of the gap we're trying to fill.
Because particularly the incident at Snetterton where, you know, we lost a fellow club racer, and I know being there that weekend, we all felt it. And it's if anyone's experienced a paddock which is silent, you could hear a pin drop, and everyone kind of felt in a different way. And I don't think we should take away from the fact that even if you weren't there or didn't see it, to be around it and know that you've lost someone in our community can impact you in loads of different ways, and there's no shame in that. It's completely normal, and sometimes you need someone who can kind of understand that. And I know from Nick's perspective, you know, Nick witnessed an incident but had no part in it. But, you know, I know in your head you were spiraling, going back a lap and a half. Why did this different? Would this do different? Would this impact this? And you almost kind of wanted to try and find, I don't know, something to hold on to. Like, if I did this different, then it couldn't happen. But ultimately, it just is what it is. And you couldn't, there's nothing, you know, that Nick could have done any differently. It was an incident that happened. And I think it's how you kind of get your brain to process that and kind of accept what's happened, and then what help and support do you need to kind of get used to that and kind of come to terms with it. And I think sometimes you do need someone who does have that, you know, experience and have had it to kind of talk through and go, that was absolutely horrendous. Let's talk it through. Tell me bit by bit what part you thought you had in that. And actually having someone to rationalise with you and go, oh, there's nothing I could have done there. I think sometimes you just need to hear that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be big things like that, and it can be small things like a bit of road rage isn't the right word on track. What do you call road rage on track, Rob?
Race rage?
Almost, yeah. A bit of fisticuffs, yeah.
Yeah, it's again we spoke about it's a high pressure environment. It's to be expected sometimes. It doesn't mean it's to be excused, but sometimes it's to be expected, and sometimes
no. But I mean, you make the point there. I think with the way Motorsport UK are now clamping down on that behaviour, maybe negates a bit of the. I think that there's very much right. There's only one way you're going to get treated, whether you're the instigator or the person that's potentially the victim. Will bash your heads together. You'll both get a ban. We've seen that recently, actually, with the British GT. There was two that were having. Let's just say they had a disagreement. Words were spoken, bit of pushing and shoving, and they both got ejected from the meeting, like that. No. So I guess that's one way that Motorsport UK have actually helped.
It's mixed for me. I think spending a few years in British GT paddock in particular, and it's so, in terms of how it's set up and the rules around, I mean, there's like 30 rules of how a pit stop should run. You know, everything is so technically regulated from the car setup, which is out of your control, the balance of performance. It creates a very high, intense environment, coupled with the fact that, you know, a wing mirror costs $5,000 to replace. So if you knacker anything in the car, and if you're a driver who is scraped together a six-figure sum to race, and then something happens out on track that financially can do you over or make it very, very difficult for you, you can understand how emotions get so incredibly high. And as much as MSU have stamped things out, so you know what, we do not tolerate any kind of negative behaviour. I almost want to say, what can we do to capture it before it gets to that point? Because I've been in a garage in British GT, and a driver gets out of a car so incredibly angry and fuming and wants to let off that steam, and there's nowhere they can really go because they don't want to sort of speak to their manager, they don't want to speak to their team, their family. They just want to literally sort of, I don't know, self-implode, or it'll go.
They almost want to grab someone by the scruff of the neck and give them a learning, because again, and you don't want to sort of say, well, it's just one of those things, but you kind of hark back to the 70s and 80s, and you know, you guys are fans of Formula One. I know you are. What's the most famous incident that everyone talks about? Was it 1982? Nelson Piquet and Salazar at the chicane having a punch up. You know, James Hunt punching a marshal because of the adrenaline, and everyone looks back and goes, "Oh, wasn't that fantastic?" They were different characters back then, but of course, if you do that at a meeting now, you've potentially lost your license for something that's very.
I saw it at Spa back in 2019 of one driver coming into the garage of another with fisticuffs, and they both had helmets on. And I stupidly was like, "Well, you can try punching him, but you're only going to hurt your fist more than him in a helmet." But it just shows that raw emotion of you get out the car, your adrenaline is jacked up, and your chimp mentality brain's like, I need to go and release this and prove my point. And it's, how do we teach people and drivers before getting in the car that if X, Y, Z happens, is how you deal with it. You use your cool down lap to cool yourself down, not just your brakes and your tyres or whatever.
Yeah.
And then what's a healthier way, rather than storming into another person's garage, but is there an outlet that you can speak to, have a go at? You know, I did, as years working in a garage with teams, I was that kind of vent for people, whether it was a team manager, an engineer or a driver. If something bad went happened, went wrong, I'd be the person in the office who would be like, come and download to me, talk to me about it, because I will agree with you that someone was see you next Tuesday, be honest, be angry, but don't take it outside the truck, basically, because like you say, that's where you're going to get yourself into trouble.
I think.
I suppose, Nick, hang on, I've got to ask Nick this actually, because you did so obviously, I mean, a lot of people would know you affectionately, not so much as Nick Gough, but Team Moarwin. And the one thing I can remember from you, but long before you did C1s, you had that wonderful Audi TT. You started off doing track days, you entered into racing, and then I can remember watching a live stream, you know, as I always do. I'm motorsport geek, and at the time I was as part of Club Racing UK. And I was watching the live stream at Snetterton, and I watched an incident that effectively wrote off your Audi. And I thought to myself, how you've kept your composure after that. I mean, talk us through it, because your emotions from that day must have been up and down.
Yeah, so that was, was it lap 1? No, it was lap 2. So it was second time round, and yeah, obviously I'm just minding my own business going around the turn 2 at Snetterton, which, if you know, it is a nice little hairpin, halfway round it, and I see something coming to the side of me at full speed. I'm thinking, hold on, I checked my mirrors, there's definitely nobody there. So I don't really know what's happened, aside from I've got a Civic embedded in my door. And sort of, yeah, it was a big hit. I knew that there was going to be a lot of damage. And yeah, sort of took a couple of corners, shook the car about, as you do if you had a big hit like that. And it felt a bit weird, but I thought, we've got to go for it. And yeah, I was angry, but I think, Katie, you've commented before when you've seen in-car clips, I don't have an emotional response in that moment. It's very much like, okay, where's the gear? What do I need? And go. And I don't talk that much. I don't shout, swear, rant. I'm just sort of, I'm in a mindset when I'm in the race. And I think actually I set my fastest ever lap of Snetterton after that, but we won't worry about that. And
Weight
then,
reduction.
It was in road sports. So there was a pit stop halfway through the race. And I knew something was definitely not right with the car when someone opened my passenger door to give me a drink, not my driver's door, because it turns out they didn't want to risk opening it in case we never got it closed again, which was a good shout. But they just said, time's fine, carry on as you are and go for it. So done that, obviously finished the race, got back out, had a look at the car, and I was like, wow, okay, that's properly stoved in. That's not ideal. And yeah, probably myself, I got out of the car into the garage and was annoyed for 60 seconds. I had a couple of guys there from the team just sort of like calm me down, like, it is what it is. We'll move on. He'll come back and apologise. And yeah, just really, it was just a case of waiting for that, because we know with their racing and incidents happen. I'm not one to storm up to someone if I think it's their fault or not. And I suppose part of that is in line with the sort of racing with respect now. You'd hope someone wouldn't do that to you. And yeah, I suppose if I can go on from that, I obviously had my little incident in the C1 in the City Car Cup at the start of the year at Snetterton, where I'd done a similar thing to someone else, and just overcooked the last corner at Snet and took out Brad Porter's door on his C1, glass everywhere. It made for great photos. And I was devastated. We got into Parc Ferme. I stalled the car because I forgot to turn it off before I let off the clutch when I left it in gear. And I ran up to him just to give him a hug and apologise. And he was absolutely sound. And I think that's how stuff can and should be dealt with if we can learn to control our emotions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think no one particularly intends to go out and cause harm out on track or damage someone's car. Everyone's there putting their thousands of pounds into it. It's very rare that someone's going to do something deliberately, lapse in judgment, ran out of talent or whatever reason. But like Nick said, I think it's owning it and going, do you know what, I'm going to just go over, speak to that person, make sure they're okay, because I know that if that happens to me, I'd hope that someone did the same to me. And it's that racing with respect point, you know, and it's dealing with it but in the right way. And you know, particularly in my day job, a lot of people, things go wrong, things happen, people make mistakes, and I always say it's okay to be angry, be upset, feel that emotion, but make sure you do it in a healthy way, and there's ways you can smash things up healthily, but but doesn't involve smashing other people's stuff. And feel it, and then, okay, you've had that moment, you felt it, and how do you move on from it and get yourself sort of around that? Otherwise, everyone else in the incident, they've moved on, they've got over it, they've forgotten about it. The only person who sat there angry is yourself, and then you end up damaging yourself and get yourself more angry rather than, you know, dealing with it and, you know, moving past it.
Absolutely. And there's obviously you hark back there, Nick, to a racer who was tragically killed in the same race as you, and I actually hark back to an experience that I wasn't in the race myself, but we all saw it recently, the tragic death of Robert Foote at Brands Hatch, the marshal, that was killed in an awful incident on the Saturday. And again, at the time, I was part of Club Racing UK, and the next morning my phone rang and it was Stefan, and we had a conversation about it, and he said, look, and it was quite early in the morning, and he just said to me, look, shall we go to Brands? And I'd messaged a couple of people, so obviously this had happened, the poor guy died, obviously they stopped the racing, they have to do an investigation, so I was messaging a few friends that I knew were in that paddock, and they were very despondent, very numb. So we spent a Sunday going round and speaking to friends, speaking to people that we knew really well. And there's one question that I asked all of them. You know, have you had any support? Have you had anyone come round and speak to you about it? Especially the people that were in the same race. And they all said the same thing, no. They had officials that had a job to do. You know, I'm not bagging anyone, the officials and anything like that, but it kind of shows that I think with that side of things, and a lot of people will start bagging, oh, all we talk about is mental health. Well, yes, we do nowadays, because 30 years ago we didn't talk about mental health, but you know, the issues were still there. They just weren't recorded as much. But unfortunately, we are in a world now where everything is seen. Everything is seen. We have social media, so the world is suddenly more accessible and open to viewing these things, if you get what I mean. Stay with me here, viewers and listeners. But you know, certainly I came away from that paddock that day thinking to myself, yeah, definitely it's needed. So with something like Driven Minds, when it was opened up, and you know, I'm very pleased and proud to say that I'm an ambassador of sorts for Driven Minds. Might be a bit of an exclusive, but you know, it's something that needs to be out there. So I will carry the Driven Minds logo on my car, and I will sing their praises wherever I can, because I believe it has its place in motorsport, and in a very important place, whether you're a professional, whether you're an amateur, whether you're someone that's self-employed, whether you're anyone. Basically, that's what it boils down to. Anyone could need that support at any time. So, okay, so we go from that. We've come out of COVID and we've recognised all these things, and you get together. So, it was at this point that Eliza's technology, unfortunately, let her down. Just as I was asking the question about where Driven Minds had got to post COVID. So, take a break, have a biscuit and a cup of tea, and we'll come back to you with part 2. Okay, welcome back. It's the second part of the podcast. We've fixed a technical issue to Eliza, I hope. And it's time to get into post-COVID with Driven Minds, effectively. So, Eliza, I was kind of saying to you, Driven Minds coming out of COVID, we had the long lockdowns, and to start with, it was kind of a bit of a campaign more than an organisation. So, what happened post-COVID, and how did it develop from there?
So it started off as a discussion to do a social media campaign, and it kind of just grew. It's the only way I can explain it. And we basically, my brain's gone blank. It kind of just grew and grew, and then it was like, okay, we'll make a social media page, and then it turned into, not many people know what charities are around that can help, and then it kind of grew more and more, and then this year Katie and Nick came on as directors, and it just kept growing, and now we're where we are.
Yeah, so obviously did the events were quite early on after COVID, so were they a big part of your decision making?
I don't really know, to be honest. I don't think
there was anything that kind of pushed it. It just snowballed.
Okay, Nick, Katie?
Sorry, I thought Nick's going to jump in. Yeah, I think sort of like post-COVID, we started to do obviously like a lot more. And I think we really noticed, obviously we had loads of people who joined sort of during the kind of COVID lockdowns, and then their diaries just exploded as motorsport just opened up. And everything was kind of a bit frantic. I know I felt that myself. And I think that kind of created that more of a need to, okay, we've done a lot on social media, a lot of kind of posts and, you know, signposting, but actually we can probably get out there now. There's car shows happening, there's race meets happening. This is a good opportunity for us to kind of get out there. And I think, you know, Nick getting on board in particular, you know, he's got race weekends, he's got awnings and floors, and the resources and access to resources that we kind of needed to get out there and actually physically speak to more people rather than responding to messages or emails, but going to see people out on track. And I know a race weekend's pretty busy and pretty hectic, so we were kind of using little bits and pieces between sessions to kind of check in on people and have chats. And I think particularly in club racing, as you'll know, Rob, that it's such a friendly community and a friendly environment, and typically you would have people would come and see you sort of in between sessions, or how did your race get on, or I saw this out there, or you did really great on this, and kind of taking advantage of that in a positive way and kind of reinforcing that positive community that we have. And I think being more visible is when obviously BRSCC reached out to us.
Yeah, I think probably from my perspective, I joined at the start of last year, start of 2022 as a champion. And like I say, we had a good presence online. I think it's fair to say it's certainly from my perspective, I saw that there's a lot of potential there, and that's why I sort of spoke to Eliza and said, look, do you mind us coming on board? I'll use my sort of, I suppose from one respect, knowledge from a sort of a business perspective to help us sort of get into different avenues and explore other avenues, because we're doing a great job online, but where else can we go from there? Where else can we build to push on, ultimately help more people and increase the community even larger? So we obviously set ourselves a target. I think wasn't our first show, but was it our first stand last year, Eliza, at Tops and Cars?
So we actually did a trial show in 2021, October. And it didn't go very well because it was a show that we started on our own. And because we didn't quite have the presence, we didn't get the crowd, and COVID was still around and things were going all a bit weird. But our first proper stand was last year. Like, that was our first real attempt.
Yeah, so that was Cops and Cars last August, and it went okay. We then, off the back of that, we had a second show at Newark where we had Newark Showground, with exclusive JDM. So again, we had a nice stand, and we sort of started to realise you can make a difference. People will come and speak to you, and even if it's one or two people that open up to you or ask for your details, you realise that you're making a difference. And we sort of decided from there that this year we would push that even further. I think it's always been in our sights where if we could get involved with a body such as BRSCC, we might be able to sort of make an even bigger difference. Obviously, to build a presence, you need to have a stage, and what BRSCC have sort of done is provide us with that stage at a race weekend where we can hopefully begin to help more and more racers, marshals, photographers, club officials, mechanics, everyone really.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good point. So we've experienced ourselves is, you know, MSUK are getting better and they're building on their support from a mental health perspective, but I feel like it's very still much driver focused. And I think from speaking to BRSCC, the more you think about it, the more people that are impacted by things that happen on circuit, particularly marshals being an absolute massive one.
Yeah.
And, you know, that them sometimes maybe forgotten about. And I think we're all kind of guilty at times of just assuming they're always there for us. And actually, what are we giving back to the people who volunteer their weekends and potentially put themselves, you know, at risk, at danger, and also kind of having to deal with quite horrific things? You know, I don't think I could, you know, continue on a race weekend after seeing a fatality or a really serious accident. So I've got the utmost respect for them. And I guess a part of pairing with BRCC is because they know that and they recognise that, and they want to do more for circuit staff, marshals, race team members, whether it's sort of, you know, a lad and dad setup or a more established team, but just having that kind of access to support outside of drivers.
Absolutely. And so the BRSCC really is just, is it more of a newer opportunity of you guys to get not so much the corporate backing, but the you know, to have the backing of a genuine racing club there to kind of support your efforts?
Yeah, I think initially it's providing us, like I said, it's providing us with a stage, but it's also, I suppose it's nice to be recognised, and it's almost validation in a way that this idea that the three of us are sort of getting behind and pushing on isn't just for ourselves, and that actually other people can see the benefit of it. And clearly it's something out there, or something new out there, that no one else is kind of focusing on. So to be sort of invited to speak to BRSCC is fantastic in the first place. And hopefully, like I say, we've got a couple of trial days coming up this year, and then hopefully next year we can increase the number of days that we spend in paddocks with them.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Eliza, your thoughts on the deal when it came together?
So to be fair, this has been Katie and Nick's kind of baby so far, because I've had a couple of my own issues going on in the background, so I've had to take a bit of a step back. So Katie and Nick have taken this under their wing, and when Nick had texted me the first time going, I've had a conversation with the BRCC and they're interested in having a proper conversation with us, I was like, sorry, what? And then it was a bit of a, I can't explain it. It was like a surreal moment, to be honest. Like,
is it almost a validating moment as well for you three, because it's effectively your thoughts on the whole process, the reason why Driven Minds was set up, has kind of been appeased, because an organising club of great history, great stature, and that, you know, with tremendous corporate and social responsibilities themselves, have seen you guys and gone, that is needed. We need to get this partnership in place.
Yeah, and I think when you first start out, I was going to say we started out for selfish reasons. We started out because ourselves wanted access to support, and we knew our kind of friendship groups and people we knew quite well sort of knew that need. But it's not until someone who you don't have a close relationship with, they're not like your friends championing you because they want to be a supportive friend, but it's people that you don't typically interact with on a daily basis saying to you, I wish I'd known about you sooner, or, you know, we need to have a conversation, and we've been thinking about this for a while. We want to do more, and you guys could really help us do that. And as Eliza said, it's that kind of, oh my God, yes, we've been building this up slowly for the last 2 years, really made a push at the beginning of this year, and to kind of get that kind of backing and support, and, you know, that kind of, you say like validation of like, yes, we're doing something and we want to help, and we're going to be able to do that. Because like you say, like, you know, when they said, we wish you were at this round this weekend because this incident happened, and it would have been great if we could appointed this person to you, you know, just kind of highlighted the need that there is in paddocks at the moment.
I think it's we speak about it, and our sort of long-term goal is, we kind of think it would be great if we had an ambassador or a champion or multiple people in every paddock in the UK. So, you know, as a racer, as a marshal, whoever you are, if you're at a circuit or a race weekend and you're having a bad time, you've got someone there, and someone who's visible, who you know you can approach, who are going to be friendly, and they're going to take time to speak to you. Because I think that's what's important to us as well. You know, it's not just the three of us. We've got a good list of ambassadors, a good list of champions now, who are there to support not only us but everyone else as well. And we're obviously at some point soon we'll be pushing out to sort of have a bit of a recruitment drive. But it's got to be the right people who are prepared to speak to anybody that comes up to them, and be there in paddocks. And I think that's going to be sort of vital to us pushing on and growing over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. It's going to be getting support from people who are like-minded.
Absolutely. I mean, so my next question to do with that, and it's aimed at you three. We'll go across the three of you with this one. So, what issues do you guys feel are in motorsport at the moment, in particular, that need to be addressed? And you can do that with Driven Minds. We start with Eliza and go across to Nick and Katie. So it gives Nick and Katie time to have a think. I put Eliza on the spot, but what are there any particular issues you feel that, especially with mental health and with giving people support, that you think need to be addressed now?
I think personal, maybe selfish thought coming from the mechanic side is the kind of looking at burnout, stress, calendars building up, things like that. They need all addressing, really. Whether that's personally or in a championship kind of format, I don't know. But it's quite difficult, especially because you could have work for the whole season and then one weekend will happen and you'll have no work. So I think it's kind of like dealing with maybe rejection, stress, burnout. That's kind of my massive thoughts at the minute, because I do have a couple of mechanic friends that are facing all of these issues, and there's drivers that will face these issues, like they have sponsorship and then they don't. Same with grid girling, marshalling, anything like that. Really, it faces everyone. But I guess I come from a bit more of a selfish. I was a mechanic. I lost work. I did burn out. Things like that.
It's not selfish. It's experience. Just to
I guess.
Nick, well, it's a great point, Nick. But absolutely spot on there. It's not so much selfish thinking. It's that's your personal experience. That's what you've actually had to face. So, okay, well, Nick, now you've spoken up. You're next. What issues do you feel need to be addressed?
Yeah, for me, it's dealing with I'm going to call it trauma, or traumatic events. It's the aftermath of big accidents, seeing big accidents, being involved in big accidents, being on a track when it's not your team, it's not even your teammate, but you've seen something. For me, there's not enough visible support out there at the minute, and that's something that massively needs to change. As part of our partnership with BRSCC, there's either an email address to be set up, or there has been one set up. Bit rubbish, because it'd be nice to give you that email address right now. But
at the minute, I was going to say, at the minute, they're sending people to our Gmail that we currently have.
Right. Yeah. So there is an email address out there at the minute where the idea behind that is to be passed on to people by BRSCC Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after a race weekend, if there is something that they think specifically they need to, or there's a potential where people would like to discuss it. And in the first instance, like I said, there's the email address there, but it isn't just a case of sending an email. If people want to pick up the phone, I'm happy to pass on my mobile number to someone who wants to talk through something, as I'm sure is Katie and Eliza as well. But yeah, that dealing with those big accidents in the aftermath, I think as a community we could do a lot better. And the only way to to do better is to instill change, and that's what we're hoping to kind of do and fill that hole. So yeah, we'll be speaking with a lot of clubs. It's not just BRCC, it's the guys, coordinators, series coordinators. Obviously, I think, for example, C1 Racing Club are racing under BRCC, but you've obviously got Robin and Tom there who are your coordinators. So it's probably going to be having conversations with people like that to sort of make them aware of this outlet for people, and just making sure people are aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay, and Katie, over to you. Last but certainly not least, what issues do you feel at the moment need to be addressed?
I think I'm trying to think of anything that's particularly topical, and I think I've maybe touched on it earlier, was around the kind of the mental resilience and how you handle when things go wrong. And I think we've seen publicly, you know, it's quite commonplace where you see on a live stream someone gets out the car, they're angry or frustrated. And I'm coming from a place where, so my day job, we sponsor a karting championship, and you know, I've been to a few rounds, Nick has, and the pressure that these kids who are like 8, 9, 10 years old is intense already. It's a large expense. It absolutely blew me away. You know, the setups that they have, it's absolutely crazy. And you've got these little kids, you know, all in the kind of gear in their hands, devices and helmets, and everything's kind of, you know, set up for them, and the pressure they must go through that young. And that's only going to continue because a lot of them have these aspirations to be the next Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, but kind of go down that kind of trajectory. And I think it's really important that we sort of instill and be a good example of people, how you handle failure, things going wrong, you know, or things that are outside of your control. If your car breaks and you have a DNF, that's sometimes there's nothing you could have done. It's just racing. And we always say that motorsport can be so cruel to you at times, and it's how you kind of recover from that. And there have been some more kind of public kind of meltdowns where you've got teams posting online these sort of statements, and it causes gossip and causes all these kind of speculation of what's going on. And they're doing something which is well intended. It's sort of publicly stating what's happened. If I was the driver at the end of that, I'd be like, how do I even cope with that? How do I cope with the social media posts and people saying stuff, or people only hear one side or see one side of a paddock incident, and how do I cope with that?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's starting to happen a lot more. And I guess maybe because racing's a lot more expensive now, there's a lot more to lose. People are fighting for sponsorship and fighting for those results to justify the thousands of pounds the sponsors give to them. It's almost like an increased pressure to do well. And if things go wrong, it's a much bigger explosion, understandably, that's happening. And it's how they kind of cope with that. You know, my focus has always been around mental fitness and how you recover from failure and kind of live it and then dust yourself off. And
also, you talk about the mental resilience and that will to win perhaps coming too much for some people. And to, you know, when you put that into perspective, if you think of the amount of races you enter in a career, even the top professional drivers, the most successful drivers, will probably win 30% of the races that they enter in a lifetime, and that's the very best. Do that. Obviously, most club racers will never get on the top step of a podium. You know, those that do, they'll either develop a massive ego and go on to win some more, or they'll just stay humble and go on to it. It's, you know, the winning does change people. But it almost, like, you know, the like you said, Katie, the enormous pressure of getting there as well. And Eliza, you made the great point as well. The mechanics, effectively, you know, the teams running the cars, there's a lot more of those folks around a paddock than drivers. So, you know, that's more minds that maybe need nurturing a bit, and some that may need a bit of help. And certainly with the uncertainty, even before COVID, of the mechanics work, a lot of it is freelance. You're fighting for survival yourselves to get a steady income, to get the job done. And, you know, if you make a mistake, if under pressure, if you do the wrong thing, that can knock you back as well. If you have an unfortunate, you know, like Eliza, you damaged your hand, unfortunately, and that's ultimately, you know, affected you in a certain way. It is a bit of a minefield out there. And the other thing to stress as well, this isn't the what I'd like to call woke what the world likes to call the woke side of things, which really annoys me. You can't. Mental health is it's a big issue. And the old school people will say, oh, well, it wasn't an issue 40 years ago. Well, yes, it was. But the problem is it wasn't as in focus as much because you didn't have social media. The papers didn't talk about it. There were more stigmas around. You know, the mental health was still affecting blokes, but back then you had to brush it off because, you know, you had to be a manly man and all that. But nowadays, you know, we're a much more open and forgiving society and a much more progressive society, I feel. I don't know about you guys, but...
And I feel like, you know, old school, you don't talk about mental health problems, you don't talk about stress, but it has always been there. And, you know, Eliza touched on, you know, the stress of being a mechanic and, you know, working with race teams over the years. And after a bad weekend or a bad race day or qualifying day, the car doesn't want to work with you. There's problems, nightmares, mechanical issues. The drivers can just go home, obviously disappointed and frustrated, but they go home back to the hotel, refresh the next day. But the team are left behind and they're the ones that have to find the issue with the car, fix it, try and figure out, and they'll have that, you know, weight on their shoulders. And that's the stress there, you know, is how they kind of cope with that. And I worked with Track Focus back in 2019 and the KTM was very high maintenance, beautiful car. I absolutely loved it. But, you know, it was difficult to work with at times. And we had the mentality of we arrive at track and we leave at track together. So even though I'm not a mechanic, I would do, you know, anything but to avoid going near it. Absolutely useless. But it meant that even though my job finished at 5, they would be still going. I'd be watching them work relentlessly without breaks, just continuing on because it was that pressure, I guess. You know, you've got a paying customer who wants to go out and enjoy their race car and it's not playing with you and it's not doing what it should be doing. And they take a lot of the brunt of making sure it's fixed and it's working and it's ready and it's going to perform to where it should be. And I think that must be incredibly, you know, a very high pressure environment to be in. And I think that's been obviously felt for the decades and decades that people have been racing, that must be happening. And it's what support we have access to, you know, in that situation to cope with, really.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think people are still in a habit of hiding the bad days, the bad stuff. You see everybody's wins and successes, but you do find a lot of people don't publicize days when they're having a bad day. And I think, you know, I for one will probably publicize more of my bad days than good days, perhaps online. And the reason I say this is because it's perhaps going to give other people reassurance. The amount of positivity you get, the amount of people who are willing to pick you back up when you're having a bad day is heartwarming. It's incredible. And I think, why do people hide this? If we talk about it more, it becomes less of a stigma, more socially acceptable, and we all become stronger for it as a community.
I mean, I've done, you know, some social media work for teams, and when we discuss like posts and content, it's only show the good, only show the positive. And if someone's had a bad result or an incident or whatever, it's almost this like kind of, I don't know, it's like a toxic positivity. It's almost like we can't admit failure, we can't show that we're human. And I can totally see their perspective. They've got sponsors, they've got people that they want to bring on board.
There's almost a fear of failure, isn't there?
Yeah.
I would, you know, I support teams that, you know, I'm a big Mercedes F1 fan, and we all know their car's been shocking, so the least last few seasons. But I think to own it and be like, we know the car's bad, we know it needs work, we know we need to fix stuff, is much better than blaming everything else, being complete denial, or being silent on it.
Blackouts.
Yeah, and it just highlights that failure is okay. A failure is just learning.
Fail forwards.
You fail forwards, exactly. Yeah, that. And I think that's such a healthier mindset to be in. And I think if we can instill that, you know, through different kind of either race teams, drivers, you know, everything else, you know, it creates that kind of more positive environment that it's okay that things happen. It's okay that mistakes happen or issues happen, but it's how you recover from it and how you move on from it and continue and get to that success, which I think is really important. Because like you say, social media you see all the good, and then when you're having a bad day, you think, okay, what's wrong with me? Why is everyone else having this success and I'm not? and it's that comparison. That's where social media can be quite dangerous in a way, because you compare yourself and go, well, they've had an issue-free weekend, they've had these problems, how can they deal with this? But then they might be sort of struggling for sponsorship money, or they're going from round to round just scraping, or they have all these kind of stresses behind closed doors that people don't see.
No, again, Katie, fantastic points there, because that's the other side to the spectrum. Everyone just thinks race circuit, man gets in car, woman gets in car, drives fast, win or doesn't win, goes home. It just isn't like that. It's yeah, it's and that's just simplifying it. But motor racing and motorsport is a lot more complicated than that. So from now, obviously you announced a fantastic partnership with the BRSCC. You've got some brilliant events coming up. What does the future hold for Driven Minds? And I'll go Nick and Katie first, and then we'll go to Eliza to finish. So what does the future hold for Driven Minds, and where would you like to see it head to?
Big thing.
Big things. I think being accessible to as many people as possible and really get that experience, and to be able to help and support. I think it's great that we're on social media a lot more present there. It's great that people recognise us in paddocks now and know that we're there. And I think it's just a continuation of that. I think it's providing more access and more signposting to places that can help and can support, because sometimes the hardest step is out. So recognising you need to speak to somebody, and then where do you even start? Because it's great that you can, say to somebody, oh, just Google search loads of local support groups. But if someone can sort of almost hold your hand with it, they understand where you're coming from, they understand the pressures that you're going through. They'll never know exactly how you're feeling, because no one does. It's obviously personal to yourself, but to be able to kind of gently be able to point you in the right direction and make sure you get that support would be absolutely great.
Yeah. I can't really answer that, aside from it would be great to be in every single paddock on every single weekend. We're a little way off that, but hey, why not aim for that? Why not aim to be in 7 trucks of a weekend in the future? We can do it.
Yeah.
If people get behind us like BRSCC, we can do it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. Right, Eliza, the buck stops with you. What to finish off this this edition of the Driving Talk podcast with Driven Minds, powered by Icon. What for you does the future hold for Driven Minds, and where would you like to see it go?
I would honestly just like to see it grow more. In 2021, it was my baby. Now it's mine, Katie, and Nick's baby. And, it's so nice to share it with someone and not, I guess, have these successes alone. I mean, I have the team behind me, but there's moments where you don't want to say anything yet because you don't want to ruin it. And now I've got these fantastic people on my side, but it's seeing it grow and seeing more championships maybe recognise us, more organisers recognise us. And, hopes and dreams and all that. Hopefully one day we'll be in the big paddocks like British Touring Cars and British GT and working with them closely. That's the big dreams, the big futures, but it's where we need to be, because let's face it, I've worked in both those paddocks and that's where the pressure's really high. That's where everything's going on. And that's probably where it's needed just as much as it's needed in the club racing.
Yeah, comment.
Yeah.
Superb. Well, it's a great time to end there. Thank you very much, Nick Gough, Katie Ramsey, and to Eliza Clapham for joining us on the Silverlake Sit-down, this edition of the Driving Talk podcast, powered by Icon. And it's good to have the first sit-down interview done with you guys, and to hear about where Driven Minds came from, where it's heading to, and certainly with the partnership with the BRSCC, it's fantastic to see the things you guys are doing. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
Right, so for the final time, folks, bye everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.